Hi everyone, very good evening and welcome back to CrackGradeB. So in this particular session, we are going to talk about commercial banks as well as the regional rural banks, their performance, their priority sector lending related achievements, right? And all of this data is pertaining to the latest year, that is the latest data that is available with us is 2022 and 23, right? So this is the data that we'll be talking about. What are the achievements of commercial banks, what is the priority sector norms that they have achieved, and including for your regional rural banks as well. Fine. So let us start. Commercial bank. So at the end of March 23, RBI is the source of data, so you can totally trust on to this particular data. At the end of March 23, the Indian commercial banking space, it had 12 public sector banks that for in this particular document we are going to referring as PSB, that is public sector banks, 21 private sector banks, PVB, that's what we are referring them to. Next, 44 foreign banks were there and 12 small finance bank, 6 payments bank, 43 regional rural banks and 2 local area banks, right? So this was the total setup by the time of March 2023, right? By the end of March 2023, this was the commercial banking setup in India. These were the organizations which were there. Now, of these 140 commercial banks, 136 were classified as scheduled, while 4 banks were non-scheduled, right? The consolidated balance sheet of scheduled commercial banks, it grew by 12.2% in 2022, which is the highest in the 9 years. So there has been a growth in the balance sheet that was witnessed, and out of that we have also been told that of these 140 commercial banks, 136 were classified and 4 banks were non-schedules. Now there is a little note that we need to understand. See, scheduled bank का मतलब क्या? Scheduled bank का मतलब the banks which has been classified in the second schedule of RBI Act 1934, right? जो भी बैंक का नाम आपके RBI Act के second schedule में होगा, that particular bank we will be calling as scheduled bank. ठीक है, उसी को हम जो है scheduled bank कहेंगे. So 2 payments bank, that is Geo Payments Bank Limited as well as NSDL Payments Bank Limited, and 2 local area banks, that is Coastal Local Area Bank and Krishna Bhima Samruddhi Local Area Bank. They are non-scheduled commercial banks, right? So right now we saw out of 140, 136 are scheduled and 4 are non-scheduled. So that is what the data has been provided. 2 payments bank and 2 local area banks, these are the non-scheduled commercial banks that we have. That means their name has not been mentioned yet in the second schedule of RBI Act, right? We got that. Now we will be moving forward. See, the share of public sector bank in the consolidated balance sheet of the scheduled commercial bank. देखो, we have seen that there are total 140 commercial banks. See, total of all of it 140 commercial banks we have. Now out of this 136 are scheduled commercial banks, right? So what is the share of public sector banks? So it has declined from 58%. This was the share at the end of March 2022 to now 57.6% at the end of March 2023. That means if the balance sheet of all commercial banks are combined together, now this is the share of public sector bank which is going to be there. 57.6%. Now whatever data has been represented in this particular class has been taken from the latest data of RBI, right? So the source credential you do not have to worry about. Now while the private sector banks, they have gained share from 34% to 34.7 at the end of March 23, public sector banks have accounted for 61% of total deposits, right? Whatever total deposits have happened, 61% have happened in the public sector banks and 57.9% of the total advances, right? So still public sector bank is the leading, what you can say, leading pillar in the setup of scheduled commercial bank. ठीक है, Public sector bank is accounting 61% of the total deposits of the scheduled commercial bank. जितना भी deposit आता है total all 136 scheduled commercial bank में, out of that 61% goes in the public sector banks, and whatever advances are being made by the scheduled commercial banks, there are total 136 scheduled commercial bank, right? Out of those 136 scheduled commercial bank, your public sector banks are having 57.9% of share if we talk about advances as well. अगर हम advances के बारे में भी बात करें तो, right? Now you see, at the end of March 23, 81.2% of the scheduled commercial bank investments, they were in the government securities, right? SLR investments of SEBI, it has been rose by 14.2% in 2022 as compared with the growth of 9% in the previous year, right? And it has led to incremental investment deposit ratio. Investment deposit ka ratio matlab what are the deposits that the bank is having, right? And how much investment bank has made out of it. So the majority of investment is lying into the government security. So this is also by discussing this, we are talking about the nitty-gritties of the commercial banks, right? Where their deposits are at, what is the NPA, what is the priority sector lending norms that they are covering. So all these things we will be discussing. The credit to deposit ratio of the bank has increased from 74% to 77% at the end of November 23 on the account of robust credit growth. So such kind of percentage, they tell you what is the deposit that you are having and what is the credit that you are giving out of it, right? Why it is not 100%? 100% क्यों नहीं है? Because you have to remember that whatever total deposits a bank receives, that all of it cannot be lent, right? A portion of it has to be kept in form of SLR as well as the CRR. ठीक है, हमें SLR और CRR भी maintain करनी पड़ती है. That is why it cannot be 100%. Right? Next is off balance sheet operations. Now this is the most asked thing. What is off balance sheet items? Right, off balance sheet items, it is talked about in the government parlance as well, and even in this particular concern as well. So let us understand a little bit of it. Suppose there is an entity, right? There are some items which are not directly represented in its balance sheet. ठीक है, इसकी balance sheet में सीधा represented नहीं है, but at the end of the day, these items, they are impacting the balance sheet, right? अब जैसे how it is going to happen, I'll tell you an example. For example, government has to support public sector undertakings. Government को support करना होता है, but if the government need money, for example, if the government needs money, then what the government will say to PSUs? Please take a loan. Now, this particular loan which has been taken by the PSU will be represented in their balance sheet, ठीक है? But it will not be represented in the balance sheet of government. Government की balance sheet में तो represent होगा नहीं. But who is liable indirectly for it? Indirectly, government is liable for it. So this is called as off balance sheet borrowing, and these are some items as well. So anything which impacts an entity indirectly, but it is not represented in its balance sheet, is something that we call as off balance sheet things, right? So contingent liability, this is also not there onto the balance sheet, but what is it? See, there are some liabilities, the happening of which is not clear. Okay, for example, suppose a court case is happening. अब now you do not know the result of court case. आपको पता ही नहीं है कि court case का result क्या आएगा, whether you will be able to sail through or you will not be able to sail through, right? You do not know that what is going to be your liability. So in that particular case, if you do not know the amount of liability, if you are not certain for it, what you are going to do, you are not going to put the liability in your balance sheet, you are just going to write a note for it. ठीक है, आप बस एक note लिख दोगे कि हाँ, this is the contingent liability, and if this fructifies, right, if it becomes certain, then this is going to be the loss that we will be facing. So contingent liability का मतलब क्या? The happening of which is not clear yet, but if it happened, it can cause entity a loss, right? So this is what. So contingent liability has also grew by 22.4%, right, led by growth in forward exchange contracts. So this is the only thing that you had to, what you can say, take, although it is not was very important, इतना बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरी नहीं था, but yes. Now we'll be talking about the sectoral credit as well as the NPA. Sectoral credit में we will see that which sectors have been lent by the commercial banks. ठीक है, कौन से sectors को commercial bank ने loan दिया है. So gross NPA ratio, it remained at highest for the agriculture sector, right? So the most amount of non-performing asset has been faced from the agriculture sector for the your commercial banks, and it has been lowest for the retail loans as at the end of September 2023, car loan, these kind of loans, right? Credit to micro and small enterprises, it has accelerated during the year 2020 and 2021. It reflected the benefits of emergency credit line guarantee scheme that was launched, right? So this particular scheme, why it was launched? That please provide the credit to micro, small and medium enterprises, and there will be guarantee for it, because as a bank, as a financial institution, if you are providing credit to it, yes, there is a credit risk, but if you give the credit to such kind of enterprises, but we are going to compensate you for that, right? So this was that. Next is, now we will be comparing how the public sector bank and private sector bank have performed in relation to your MSMEs. So reversing the movement over the previous 4 consecutive years, PSBs, that is public sector banks, credit growth to MSME sector in the year 2022, it has exceeded that of the private sector banks. That means public sector bank has given more amount of credit to the MSMEs. This has led to increase in the farmers' share in total MSME credit from 47.5% to 48%. That is, this is the share of public sector bank in total MSME credit. That means if in India MSMEs are getting 100 rupees as credit, then out of it 48 rupees they are getting from the public sector banks. ठीक है, उनको इतना credit जो है वो public sector bank से मिल रहा है. Now let's talk about the priority sector credit. So in the recent years, private sector banks' overall credit growth was higher than that of the public sector banks. As a result, private sector banks, they were required to accelerate their priority sector lending to meet the regulatory requirements. Now we are going to see a diagram, which diagram is going to tell us that what is the priority sector lending by banks at the end of March 2023. ठीक है, March 2023 के end में what is going to be the priority sector lending by the banks. So let us see that. Yes. So here are the targets, right? Depending on to the bank, I am going to just increase it a bit further. Yes. So total priority sector advances, let us say 40% it is, out of which 18% to agriculture, small and marginal 9.5%, right? 13.8% to non-corporate individual farmers, micro enterprises 7.5, weaker sections 11.5. So this is the target that we are having. Now out of it, what the public sector bank has given, private, तो आपको कहाँ पे focus करना है? This area, right? This is the area that we will be focusing. These are the areas. First of all, we'll be talking about the public sector banks. Then we'll talk about private sector banks, foreign banks, small finance, and total scheduled commercial banks. right? The total of it. If we will see the public sector banks, they have given 43.7% of the priority sector advances. 40% is the mandate, ठीक है, 40% आपका mandate है, और public sector banks को कितना मिला है? 43.7%. Just wait for a second. Yes. So, although the mandate is 40%, but they have given 43.7%. For the agriculture total, they have given 19.7. Small and marginal farmers have got 11.4. Individual farmers 15.7, and weaker sections have got 14.4%. So that means they have fully done that their responsibility. Private sector banks have been a step ahead, and 45% is what they have fulfilled and they have given to the priority sector lending. Although they were mandated to do 40%, but they have given 45%. Agriculture again have got 17.5, they have lagged behind it, right? Non-corporate individual farmers 12.8, and weaker sections have got 11.5, right? Foreign banks not so much of necessity, so we are going to ignore it, ठीक है? Foreign banks हमें नहीं करना है. Let us see the small finance bank. Yes, 88.2%. Although they were required to do 75%, right? The limit onto them or the applicability onto them was 75%, but they have done 88.2%. Agriculture 27%, and likewise. So if you remember only this particular data, that will be more than enough. Yes. So now talking about while the public sector banks, they have extended 43.7% of their credit to the priority sector, this portfolio contributed to 56.2% of their total NPAs. That means the total NPAs that the public sector bank was having, whatever total NPAs they were having, 56% of their NPA was because of the priority sector. ठीक है, जो उन्होंने लोन्स प्रायोरिटी सेक्टर को दिए हैं, 56% out of total NPAs, 56% of such loans belong to the priority sector. So that is an important data. Priority sector, it comprised of 88% of the 88.2% of the scheduled banks, but its share in the total NPAs has fallen significantly to 43.2% in 2022 from the 89.9%, right? So your small finance bank, they have given 88.2% of lending, right? But out of the total NPAs that the small finance bank is having, 43% belong to the priority sector. So this has fallen. Now let's talk about the structure and the role of regional rural banks. ठीक है, इनका क्या role रहा है? What are the what you can say important data regarding the regional rural bank is something that we need to discuss. So at the end of March 2023, there were 43 regional rural banks. Okay, these were sponsored by 12 scheduled commercial banks with 21,000 branches, 30.6 crore deposits account and 2.9 crore loan accounts in 26 states as well as the 3 union territories. These banks have offered wide range of banking and financial products tailored to the unique needs of the rural communities that we have already read multiple number of times. 92% of the regional rural branches, they are in the rural or semi-urban areas. So majority of the branches are in the rural or semi-urban areas, followed by the southern region. They are having the highest number of regional rural banks, followed by the eastern region. So in which area you are going to find the highest regional rural banks branches? It is your southern areas. RRB's total business size, that is deposits plus credit, it stood at 10.2 lakh crores as on 31st March with a year-on-year growth of 10.1%. Now See, let's talk about the borrowings. So what are the sources of borrowings for the regional rural banks? So with the expansion in loans and advances outpacing the deposit growth, the regional rural banks, they have raised more resources through borrowings, largely from the National Bank of Agriculture and Rural Development as well as the sponsor bank. Now here the data point has also been provided to you, so that you can already guess what is the contribution in the borrowings of the regional rural banks. So you see the share of NABARD and sponsor banks in the total borrowing was 90.3%, 96% in the preceding years. Abhi whatever borrowing regional rural bank makes, out of it 90% of the borrowings it does from the NABARD as well as the sponsor bank. I hope when we were discussing the structure of cooperatives or the rural financial institutions in India, that means cooperatives and regional rural banks, there you must have learned that how there is participation in the share capital of regional rural banks by the central government, state government and the sponsor bank, right? So वही चीज हमने यहाँ पे अभी डिस्कस की है. There was a recapitalization related assistance as well. इसका भी हमने बहुत ही थोड़ा सा पार्ट ऑलरेडी पहले देख लिया था. Total recapitalization that has been sanctioned was 10,890 crores, which was more than the total capital infusion by all the stakeholders over the period of 45 years, right? So recapitalization has included proportionate share capital by state government for what they are responsible, 15%, 35% is the responsibility of sponsor bank, so they have done their bit, right, and the remaining is the responsibility of central government. So उन्होंने अपना काम किया है. Their reserves, they also grew due to internal accruals from the profits. Now RRBs credit to deposit ratio, it has reached to a 15-year high of 67.5% at the end of March 2023, and they have accounted for 2.9% in the total loan amount of all scheduled commercial banks. Wait for a second. Now, during the year 2022-23, all the regional rural banks, they have achieved their priority sector lending targets, with the largest share going to the agriculture and the MSMEs. So this is it with which we are going to end our lecture. Purpose-wise outstanding advances by the regional rural branches. So this is the purpose which has been given. See, this is the priority and this is the non-priority, right? So agriculture leads, then micro, small, medium enterprises, right, followed by housing and then your education. So this was for 2022, this was for 2023, and there are other sectors as well for non-priority sector related. So these data point has been taken up from the NABARD, and yes, all the regional rural banks, they have achieved their priority sector lending targets, and the largest share is going to the agriculture and the MSMEs. So this was the data points that we have to study, and here we have discussed that what was the role of commercial banks as well as the regional rural banks, and yesterday we discussed that what was the role of cooperatives in the rural credit structure. ठीक है? Basically the data point is not just only available for the rural credit, but on a whole we have seen that what is the standing of cooperatives along with the commercial banks and regional rural banks in India's credit structure, right? If we talk about other things, then they will be covered subsequently because we have different sort of heads. So we are going syllabus head wise, and that is what we have covered today. Rural financial structures, commercial banks का क्या role है, we have seen what is the priority sector lending norms that they are fulfilling, right? So this is it in this particular class. Hopefully you must have understood the video. If you did, then please do not forget to like this video. Thank you so much for joining in.